owning, understanding, and leveraging your power to drive your career. My name is Eric Alexander. I'm the founder and CEO of TC Band, and I'm excited to welcome you all here today. This is going to be a great conversation. Greg and I met last week to kind of do a prep session. We prepped a little bit before the session, so he has a lot of passion and energy for this topic, and it's going to be a great discussion. And I want to thank all of you for joining us, and I also want to thank you for your engagement from a question perspective. We got a lot of questions as part of the registration, so we'll try to filter those in, and we'll also create an opportunity for real-life questions as well. From an agenda perspective, I will do a quick TC Band overview for those who aren't familiar with who we are as an organization and why we exist and our value contribution to our community. And then we'll do a fireside chat with Greg. And then there'll be some time at the end for live questions. And then we'll wrap up for an on-time 1 p.m. close. So from a TC Band perspective, our vision is professional excellence through strategic collaboration. This is executed through our mission of leveraging the scale, scope, and skills embodied within our Black affinity networks and broader community to execute against 3 specific objectives. That's to deliver, build, and create. Deliver quality professional development, build cross-organizational and community connections, and create a safe space to learn, share, and grow together. And so we've had a lot of, speaking of growth, we've had a lot of growth as a TC from a DC Band's perspective over the last 10 years since we were founded. But last year we had a lot of growth. We started 2023 with 15 states and 3 countries across 2 continents represented. And we wrapped up 2023 with 32 states plus the District of Columbia, 8 countries across 5 continents, and a global community of over 1,300 members. If you are on this call, you are part of that community. So we appreciate all your engagement and support and passion for the work we do. And want to ask, if you know anybody in Australia or Antarctica, let us know, because we'd like to cover the last 2 continents that we have missing. So we're in the middle of Black History Month. And so as part of our Black History Month virtual series, we had 3 events. We kicked things off with a discussion about Black history, the history, relevance, and impact. It was a great panel discussion that talked about the history of Black History Month, what it means to us today, and how do we leverage Black History Month in this moment in time to create a legacy and a future that lives up to the expectations of our ancestors and also creates a path forward and a vision for the future generations. We also had a conversation about voting and civic engagement in the Black community, talked about the importance that voting has played in our maturation as a community, our access and those kind of things, and then the importance of making sure that we continue to leverage that opportunity to make sure that we're, again, building on the sacrifices that our ancestors made to ensure that we had that right and that opportunity and that obligation in the voting process. For 2024, we have a pretty robust slate of events. We started obviously with Black History Month. We'll have a virtual Juneteenth Select session in June. We'll also have our TC Band 17 event on June 19th. So go ahead and mark your calendars for that. That will be a hybrid summit. It will be hosted by Best Buy. So if there are any Best Buyers on the call, thank you for hosting us. And then there'll also be a virtual component. So if you're not in the Minneapolis area or you're not traveling to the Minneapolis area, you'll be able to join us virtually as well. Then we'll have a virtual leadership series. And then we'll have TC Band 18, our fall leadership summit, which will also be a hybrid. And we'll have much more. So as you guys provide surveys and reach out to us, we'll add additional sessions, content as needed to make sure that we're creating content and creating opportunities and providing resources to make sure that our community has what they need to be successful as they aspire for their professional and career goals. If you want to learn more about us, you want to connect with us, these are some resources. I would suggest maybe taking your phone and taking a snapshot. But we have a website, tcband.org. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We have a YouTube page. On LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn community. And so one of the things that Greg and I talked about in our prep session was networking. So we have hundreds of people in our community. And so if you want to try to connect with someone, you want to talk about some topics, you want to continue this conversation, our LinkedIn community is an opportunity to do that. And then if you want to rewatch this session or you want to go back in our archives and watch sessions that we've done in the past, we have a free on-demand video library that you can search on YouTube. It's TC Band, the channel. And if you follow us, you'll get notified when this session is available live and goes live on on the channel and when future sessions are available. Okay, so fireside chat. So Greg, we had to have some fire if we're going to do a fireside chat. I'm in Southern California, so it might be a little warmer than it is in Minneapolis, but there's our full fire for our fireside chat. And so as we think about the conversation, the feedback that we got, 50 plus questions that came in the survey, I framed those in a few categories. So I called it gaining and leveraging power as a Black professional, career progression, career change, mentors, sponsors, and allies, and then just a general conversation. And so that's how we'll frame the discussion. I'll initially have some questions and dialogue with Greg, and then we'll go to live Q&A. Please feel free to continue to drop comments in the chat. If I'm looking left, that's because I'm looking at my second screen and monitoring the chat to see if there's anything going on there. Oh, somebody liked my joke. I like it. I like it. So for the record, I think I'm funny. My two children think I'm funny, and my mom thinks I'm funny. So there are 4 of us that are in the Eric's Funny group. So there you go. All right. So our speaker. So I've known Greg for probably 10 years. I think we kind of met shortly after when TC BANDD started. He's the vice president of HR shared services and product technology at Target. And this is his bio. I'll just hit the highlights for you. He has a bachelor's and master's degree in information technology and a doctorate in organizational leadership. In his role as vice president of shared services at Target, he has a global accountability and a global team. It focuses on service operations, product technology, reporting, policy compliance, and crisis management. So a broad accountability set there. And then he has skill sets across the entire HR and technology spectrum, shared services, org transformations, technology, data analytics, global business services, just virtually anything. So Greg can do anything you want him to do. So I'll just, that just kind of encompasses that. But he also has a passion for community and developing communities and developing cultures and developing teams. And that's part of what he'll talk about today and what he's talked about with us in the past, as he shared his knowledge with us from a TC BANDD perspective. In addition to his kind of core job, he is an assistant professor for St. Mary's University, again, where he's teaching the graduate students and undergraduate students there about leadership, project management, and leveraging his expertise in RFPs and quality and team development to ensure that they're ready to go out and tackle their obligations as they enter the workforce. So that's the formal kind of bio. And then I'll do Eric's bio of Greg, if my screen comes up. So these are my 4 descriptors of Greg. A passionate family man. You should hear him as he talks about his son and his wrestling and his passion for making sure that he allocates time for him and his family while he also balances the obligations of his job. He's a courageous leader and advocate for others. It takes time to mentor and coach and develop, and he's willing to leverage his network to help others succeed and be successful. And then if you need me, I'll be there. And so we needed a speaker for this session. I sent Greg a note and he's like, I'm in. I said, these are potential dates. He said, I can make them all work. There's no way he could make them all work, but he made them all work. Right. And that's because of his passion and his commitment for the work he does, that we do, and the work that he does as a professional and as a person. So with no further ado, I want to welcome Greg to the stage. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to exit the presentation, and then we'll just have a conversation.
Eric, can you just intro me all the time? I mean, you do a great job.
I can. You deserve it. So thanks for joining us, Greg. So I wanted to start off in the category of gaining and leverage power as a Black professional. And so this is Black History Month, and this is our Black History Month slate of events. And so can you talk about what Black History Month means to you? And if you could weave in the conversation you had about your personal genealogy search as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think about, first, I'm really happy to be here. If you know me, I'm about development, supporting each other, helping us all build in our careers and grow. But Black History Month, being a biracial man, a lot of times, early on in my life, I would hear about it for certain segments of my family, but I didn't really dive deep into Black History Month until I got older and had kids myself. Now, older to me, I had kids in 1920, so that's what I mean by older. But I've been on this journey for the last 15 plus years around what is my own history. what does it mean for me, for my family? And I can proudly say I have tracked my family back to the 1700s. I can proudly say I understand more about not only Black history and what we're taught in the school system, what we're not taught in the school system from the 1619 Project, to how does that relate to my family and what are the dynamics that my family dealt with, what they deal with as they came over to the United States. And I have a picture of one of my family members who came from the UK on a slave ship over, and what family she actually, what plantation she was brought on, and then what was her experiences there. I was lucky enough to have a family member that has been a family historian on my dad's side that allowed me to track back to the 1700s. So for me, it's about understanding my own history, understanding the history of the United States, but then it's also about giving back. It's about how do we build, I'm going to say, use the how do we build wealth together? How do we build our career together? How do we continuously support one another? So for me, Black History Month isn't about a month. It's about a life. It's about how are we continuing to support each other, continuing to grow, and how am I understanding my own personal history, my family history, and educating my kids so that they don't have to start from being an adult. They were able to experience it from a very young age.
Well, great. I'm dropping that in the chat. Black History Month is not about a month, it's about a life.
Yeah. Eric, your audio, I couldn't hear you just now.
Got it. Thank you. I said there was a great comment, so I dropped it in chat. I'm going to take a lot of gems from you, and I'll share those with others. So great story, great passion. You're inspiring me to kind of do something similar to kind of from a genealogy perspective. So how does that knowledge of self and a knowledge of your history drive you as a professional?
That's an interesting question. We all have our own experiences. For me, at a young age, I dealt with identity issues. I mean, I'll be honest, I dealt with identity issues on who I am as an individual, how I interact with others, who accepts me. Throughout my life, I dealt with, am I accepted, even in my family? So because I dealt with my own personal identity issues and actually imposter syndrome, even in a personal family setting, understanding where I come from has given me a lot of power in who I am and how I'm representing myself going forward. So I was speaking to someone last week. I'm not going to call this individual's name out because they're on the call, but I was talking about what countries in Africa my family heritage comes from. Knowing that is important to me. Knowing the history of what my background, my experience, my family, and how I fit into that genealogy is really important to me because it gives me power. It actually gets me past the moment of having identity issues on who I am to get shifting to knowing who I am as an individual personally. So for me, I've really benefited from understanding that history, that experience, understanding what my family went through, and sitting down with my dad's cousin and understanding what she knows about our family in the background. So to answer your question, it just gives me a lot of knowledge of what I came from and makes me proud of who I am becoming for my ancestors.
Great. Thank you. As a Black man in corporate America, can you talk about the balance you have to strike between passion and professionalism and being quiet and being reserved and pushing your point forward, and that kind of tricky balancing act that many of us have to face? I call it the Goldilocks effect. Too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft. So finding your path and being genuine to yourself while also kind of navigating a culture that has some preconceived notions of who and what we are.
Eric, that's a really good question. First, I would say, first, we all have different experiences in the Black community. So all of us deal with different things as we enter into work. So what I can answer is, I'll answer it from my perspective of how I handled it. And I handled it very differently from when I was younger to a 40-year-old or 40-something-year-old man who's an executive who can approach things a little bit differently. So when I was younger, I would come into work, and you have to understand my background and experience. I would come into work. I didn't think I could share what I did outside of work. I didn't think I could share the music I listened to. I thought I had to fit a certain mold. I thought I had to cut my hair a certain way to actually be accepted in work. So I was really good at adapting to environments. I would come in and try to fit in. And I had a coach that a couple of years ago that told me, because you try to adapt to every situation, every environment you're in, you're actually operating with a handicap. You're not operating from your own power because you're filtering. You're thinking about, this is the environment, this is how I need to respond to actually be successful. You're actually limiting the impact that you have on the organization. So just think about that a second. If you're limiting the impact that you have in the organization, because you're filtering every time you do every approach that you take to make sure it fits in and acceptable, you're actually not performing to your maximum ability. That actually had me reflect a little bit when that coach said that to me, because if I'm not performing to my maximum ability, how would it feel like if I'm able to perform to my maximum ability? Now, performing to my maximum ability as an officer is very different than when I felt like I needed to prove something. But for me, early on, I actually had to take on people that I could bounce and connect with. So I was blessed, fortunate enough to have a group of other professionals that were early on in my career, similar stages in their career, that we were able to grow together and build a village of connection. So we would bounce ideas off of each other. We would talk to each other when we're super frustrated, and we would work through how we overcame situations and feedback. Was it real feedback or was it false feedback? Like feedback on, you're too verbose in your communication. Was that real? Did you see that as me being verbose in my communication? Did you see me as being too direct? Or was that actually not real feedback? So for me, first, if you're early as you're in your career, it's really good to have a group of network of peers that you actually trust. I was fortunate, a lot of you know some of the peers that I was fortunate enough to have. I had people like Kira Fernandez, Carolyn Wanga, Demu McCoy. All of us were at similar parts in our places in our career that we were able to connect and work through situations together. As I have progressed in my career, I have moved to a place where I'm less willing to adapt, and I'm more acting in my own power. So for me, I know what I bring to the table. I know what my experience provides, and I'm no longer looking to be accepted in how I approach things. I'm bringing my talents to fruition, if that makes sense. So I am not adapting to situations anymore. But the conversation, the feedback is really real. As a Black employee in corporate America, a lot of times you receive feedback that you have to process on your own. And the best advice that I give you is not process on your own. Actually have a network, a village of people that you trust, that see you interact, that will allow you to help you process through it together.
That's great feedback. Greg, can I ask one follow-up question to that as
Yeah.
well? Because I know some people say all feedback is good feedback. You know, and I don't agree with that. I think some feedback comes from a negative, a bad place, and you just have to kind of, dump it in the trash. Can you talk quickly about that, and how do you determine, what feedback you need to absorb? I know you talked about leveraging your network to bounce ideas off and that kind of thing, but can you talk about that quickly?
Yeah, not all feedback is good feedback, honestly. When you give feedback, you're giving it from your own bias, from your own experiences. So what you need to do is you need to assess, is that actually valid feedback? Is that feedback that is actually going to help me progress my career? Or is that from their own bias? So for me, I come from a strong feedback culture at Target. But I am always assessing, is that good feedback? Is it feedback that's going to benefit me? Or is it feedback that the person's giving from their own bias that actually isn't real feedback? So I think you need to be able to assess what the feedback actually is, and also have partners that can help you assess if you're unable to. I have this thing that, in the feedback world that I'm in at Target or throughout my career, you have times that people are giving you feedback, and I'm going to say my age really quick. So you have feedback that you're assessing and you're like, this is BS feedback. This doesn't make actually any sense. A lot of times you still have to accept it and process it. So I get to a moment where, has anyone seen the Never Ending Story? And I just aged myself. So if you haven't seen it, Eric, shake your head that you've seen it, just to make me feel better. So there's a show. It's an awful movie. It's a kid movie. It's an 80s movie. So I just aged myself. Called The Never Ending Story. There's a dog that the kid is flying through the clouds with the dog. I use this analogy in my head. I share this with my kids. Sometimes you get feedback that isn't valuable, but you still need to present it like you're hearing it, but you want to shut yourself off from it. I will actually be flying through the clouds on the dog to get through the conversation, shaking my head, saying, thank you for the feedback. And then I will walk out the room and say, that was bullshit feedback, and I will move on from it. So for me, it's about what feedback, what am I willing to take on, and what feedback is actually BS, and it actually doesn't matter for me and my career.
Great. I haven't seen the movie, but I jotted it down, so I'll go watch it.
Don't watch it. Don't watch
don't
it.
watch it.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Don't watch it.
Okay. All right. I'll believe. I'll take your word for that one.
And people in the chat know the dog's name, and I did not know the dog's name. So, great job, Heather.
Yeah, we have an engaged community, Greg. So, and if they didn't, they would have fact checked it for us. They would have gotten the link. So we're good in that part of it. One thing for you though. So one of the streams that have been showing up in the chat to your comment was around bringing your whole self to work, bringing your whole self to work. And I'm like, you can bring your whole self to TC Band because we know you. You're uncles. You show up to Christmas, Thanksgiving dinner. So when you're in a TC Band event, you can show up at 100%. But at work, I just don't think that's realistic. To your true self and 100% of yourself, because it's not your employees and a job. They're not your family. They're your employers. They're your coworkers. You can have really good friends, and that's fine. But understanding that, I don't think you can bring 100%. But what's your perspective on 100% to work?
I think that you're dead on from that statement and what they're saying in the chat. You can't bring your 100%. Always your 100% true self to work, of way you interact with your family, friends, way you even interact with TC Band. A great example is me, my friend, the people that I grew up with. So I'm from Minnesota. If you're from Minnesota, you grew up here, it's sometimes my age group, there's a lot of segregation for my age group, from corporate to more non-corporate individuals. From my friend group that I grew up with, I am the only one that has a college degree and does not have a felony at 18 years old. And this is my core 5 group of best friends that I grew up with. So the way I interact with my friend group and how I let down the guard is very different than the way I have shown up day in and day out in corporate America. But what I've learning to do, and I won't say, and Leon, I see you even have this question, Leon, out there, and I'll specifically say to you, Leon, but I'll even say what I'm learning to do is, what are components of my true self that I will bring in, that I will no longer filter on how I approach my day-to-day operation. So I won't filter my value system. I won't filter my honesty or my transparency. Now, what I will filter is, I may not joke as much as I do outside of work. I may not operate the same way that I operate in work, because I talk a lot of trash with my friends outside of work. That's not always appropriate. But I will not filter the core version of who I am. And I'm still working on what is that core version of who I am. I am still adapting to being comfortable with representing the core version of who I am. But I'm trying to really ground in what is the core version of Greg, and how do I make sure that isn't filtered out as I show up to work. What I'm also assessing, though, is if I get feedback and I believe I'm very professional and I'm not losing the core version of who I am, and I get feedback that's going to impact my career, it's also going to make me assess, do I feel like I can be my true self in this organization and be successful? So I'm always assessing the way the organization responds to me and how I interact and show up, if that makes sense.
That's
Eric,
great.
it's a great example of this is 2 years ago at EIC, what is ELC, Executive Leadership Council. It was in DC. Target got a huge award. Part of who I am is, for me, because I can still grow my hair. As a young youth, I always had really long hair. I had my hair curly, fro out, and it's who I was when I was younger. And through the pandemic, I've continued to grow my hair, cut it, grow it, cut it. And we were at ELC, and it was a black tie gala. The CEO was there. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to wear my hair the way I normally wear it on the weekend. And I literally had a black tie, a tuxedo, a suit, black suit, and I wore my hair, no product in, completely froed out, talking to the CEO. For me, I am testing the waters of how I can be myself, and where I was super uncomfortable doing it. I'll be super honest, but it helps me understand how I can be my true self without any filter, my core self without any filter.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for your insight and your transparency around that. We'll transition to some other categories, more core career categories. So career progression, career change. So from a career progression perspective, what are your 3 keys to career success?
First, I don't know if I have 3, so I'm going to try to summarize and not be long-winded. Never stop the dream. So think about this. When you first started your career, you got out of college, or if you didn't went to college, you started your corporate career, you actually had a dream. Like every one of us that started any job from 18, 21, 22, whatever your career path was, mine was longer to get an actual degree, we dreamed. But then think about when you're in corporate America, you're working 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. A lot of professionals stop dreaming. When you think, Eric, let me ask you a question. Do you still dream the same way that you were dreaming years ago?
I don't. The world is kind of framing my reality, right?
Yeah, but it's important to dream. So like a great example for me is when I started my career. I mean, I'm a super troubled kid. I was out on my own at 14, 15. I did all the things. But when I had mentors that helped me. But then I started going to college and started figuring out college after I had a kid while I was in college. And I was like, I think I want to be a CIO, a CIO, CTO of a major organization. My dream then started shifting and started folding in, and I stopped dreaming. And I started showing up to work every day, started doing things, started allowing the organizations that I work for to control my career. And I'm at this point, I'm starting to get to this point a number of years ago. I'm like, I need to start dreaming again. So first and foremost, what is your dream and how do you evolve your dream? Instead of having your life frame up and control and manage it and limit your dreams, how do you allow your life to evolve your dream to still dreaming about what 10, 15 years could be? Because once you have a dream, then you have something that you're working towards. But if you don't dream, you're actually just showing up every day to get a paycheck, or you're showing up every day to live the company's dream of what your next step should be. But each of us should own our own next step. So for me, I work in HR right now, but I'm somewhat of a little bit of a square peg in a round hole in HR, because I have undergrad and master's degree in IT. I lead HR technology, operations, process, and data functions, but there's not many roles outside of HR that I could do. But for me, what I am still grounded in my dream is I actually still want to be a CTO, CIO. And I'm still dreaming of that. So that's the first thing I would say is each of you needs to never stop dreaming but allow your life to evolve your dream as you gain more experiences. The second thing, Eric, it's you always need to know your worth. Like I have been fortunate enough to see when I started my career, I'll give you a little bit of story, and I want to make you careful on time because I want to open up for questions. I started my career at Pitney Bowes Management Services in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from St. Paul, but I met my wife and we moved to Atlanta where her family was after the Olympics. Atlanta was going on in the late 90s too. If you remember, spring break was out there. So was living in Atlanta and I started Pitney Bowes. My first management job was for Pitney Bowes for a company, an insurance company, where we just took over their mailroom delivery service, copy service, and reception service. I was sitting across from this woman who's had a 25, 30 plus year career. She was the main receptionist of the company. I had a script that I had to read. I literally was told, now I'm a 21-year-old snot-nosed kid. Sorry, I'm calling myself a snot-nosed kid at that time. Talking to a woman that's in probably 5 years away from retirement, that I'm excited to offer her a job where she's going to make $8 an hour, where she previously made about $45,000 a year. But I was told the script from severance, retirement, what she's going to get from the company. I never want to be I never wanted to be put in that situation. So for me, it's super important that I understand my worth internally and externally. So when I get phone calls, and we all get phone calls, I actually always pick up the phone call. I always understand why the company's calling me, what they're looking for, how they see my skill set. I will have conversations with anyone that actually calls me so I can understand where my skill set is in the industry. So I know my worth. Because the worst thing that you can do is not know your worth externally and just know your worth internally, because then you don't actually have any power to know what you can bring and how you can push your career. So partly the way you can do that is picking up the phone, answering them. Partly the way you can do that is, what are my dream jobs and what skill sets and experiences are the people that are in those dream jobs have, and where are my gaps? Part of the way you can do that is leveraging technology. A great way that you can do is talk about what is needed for my dream job, even log on to ChatGPT. What is my dream job? And what is the job description for my dream job? What is the resume description? And then do it from all your experiences that you have to see what the gap is. So the second thing besides dreaming is knowing your worth internally and externally. And the third thing I would say, and I'm keeping it at 3, is no one's ever giving you an opportunity. You're giving them an opportunity to work with you. So think about when you're sitting in an interview and you're interviewing for a job, and this is very different than most people think. I'm interviewing for a job and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. I hope this company will give me an opportunity to work for them. What you're essentially doing is you're giving the people that are interviewing all the power in the world to actually assess you and determine if they're going to give you that opportunity. Now you flip it. I'm giving this organization an opportunity to work with me and have my skill set in their company. I am going to assess them while they're interviewing me to see if I actually want to work with them. You're not giving them the power. You're actually starting from a position of power because you're assessing them the same way they're assessing you. And it becomes an equal connection where you're both determining if you're going to do a joint relationship. So own your own power, understand your net worth, internal and external, and continue to dream.
Wow, that's a great insight, and I shared this in the chat as well. The understanding of worth is interesting. So when we had Hakeem, he did a session for us around that as well, and his perspective is you should go out every couple of years and interview for jobs. I'm not advising people to do that, but that's his perspective. He said one of 3 things happen. You go out and you find out, wow, I'm underpaid. I need to have a conversation with my organization about compensation. The second one is you go out and you're like, my skills and my salary are pretty on par, so I'm good. Or you go out and say, you know what? My skills are not valuable in the market. I'm getting paid more than my worth is in the market. I'm good. So you go show up work the next day with a smile on your face, hitting the ground hard because you understand where you sit. So I think there's definite value in understanding and being clear on your value to the market.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
There's a couple stories that I have, but I'm going to share one. In 2019 or 2018, late 2018, I had to make the decision if I'm going to become an officer, I need to get back to tech or data because what I was doing, I didn't feel like Target would give me an officer role if I wasn't in the tech and data space at the time. Now I was role specific. As 2019 circled and we got into 2020, I became super frustrated at Target. And I'm being transparent, but I think it's important that we're transparent. I became super frustrated because I actually saw everyone else being promoted, that I felt my skill set and what I provided the organization was equal or even sometimes better. But I felt other people were given a chance. So what I actually did, but then I started doubting my own skill set because at Target, I was just getting laterals. So I actually did what he recommended. I actually picked up my networking, not only just picked up the phone, I actually picked up my networking and I got it all the way to a point where I was offered a job at another large retailer that is doing exactly the job I'm doing today, plus one other function. But the one difference is that job wanted me to relocate. And at the time, I was dealing with some family things that I couldn't relocate. My kids are super important. And my son was dealing with MRSA, and he's an athlete, and I didn't want to miss his college career. So I turned down that job, but I actually got a big job and I wasn't promoted at Target yet. I actually started changing about how I talked about myself, and it gave me a little bit more of professional confidence. I sometimes call it professional swagger and how I approach things. And I actually, literally 6 months later, I was promoted at Target because I realized as I reflect, I wasn't talking about myself in the right way at the right level. It allowed me to change how I spoke about my skill set and sell myself a little bit better.
Well, that's a great story. And again, feeds into our empowerment discussion. So nice job. So a couple other questions, and then I'll open up to see if there are any live questions from the group. So I want to talk about setbacks. And so most people have something that goes awry, whether it's a bad manager or you have a big miss that's visible within your organization, or you leave a company and take a wrong job, or you stay within an organization and you move to an area or a department in a role that's just not the right fit for you. So can you talk about either a personal example or one that you're comfortable sharing that's been brought to your attention around a setback within a career and how that's been navigated to not let it continue to hold you back from your career goals?
Well, that's the one I just kind of explained is a good example of a setback. But for me, I really leverage my network. So I think it's so important to have so first of all, Eric, when you called me for TZ Band and I was like, yep, I'll do it. That's because we're connected. We're connected. We connected at a deeper level than just surface level. So for me, my network is super important to me. Like if I just had 3 people in the last week that have had changes, that have had setbacks, that are like, I am now on the market looking for a job. I looked at my network and I did introductions for those 3 people to 6 different organizations of people I trust to help them progress and help them. Then I've also met with 2 of them, not all 3 of them, and help coach them on how they're interviewing, how they're approaching their interview, how they're going to approach the jobs, and who the people are that I connected them with. So your village and your network is really important. So for me, whenever I have a setback, at least professionally, I never try to sit and deal with that setback on my own. I have to connect with people to help me work through it. Now, they may be people at different levels. There are definitely people at different levels, but they're all people that I trust, that I can honestly work through my thoughts, and they're not going to judge me. Like, they're not going to judge me, Greg, you're a hot mess right now. You're not dealing with it right. They're not going to judge me when I show up that way, but they're going to help me think through it. So for me, it's all about my connection with the people that will help me work through the difficulty and the struggle that I'm having.
Yeah, great example. And one other thing that you talked about that I wanted to follow back on and we talked about it in our conversation last week was around sponsorship.
Yeah.
And what you did where you said, I'm going to leverage my network to help you with your opportunity is sponsorship. And so can you talk about the difference between sponsorship, mentorship, and the importance? And I'll just say a personal example. So I've been enrolled for about 3 years, so I'm looking to, see what's the next opportunity for me internally within J&J. But I was having a conversation with someone who was a mentor, and she became a sponsor. She said, got it. I think you're a strong performer. I think you got great talent. I'm going to open my network up to you, and I'm going to connect you with the 5 people in my network that I think can help you with your next step. And I'm going to email them and say, Eric is talented. Please set up some time to meet. Oh, he will be setting up time to meet with you. And so she shared her credibility. She shared her access. She shared her network with me. And so that's a lot better than me doing a cold call to someone to set up an intro networking call. So can you talk about sponsorship, mentorship, and the key that's maybe had in your career or has generally within careers?
Mentorship. So my view, so whenever someone asks me to be their mentor, I immediately say, as long as you're willing to help mentor me as well. So mentorship for me has always led probably more towards friendship and connection. As I matured that relationship, it's allowed me to help them work through problems, help them think about things differently. They're also helping me think about things differently. And that builds into, a lot of times for me, it's built into a friendship because I am too honest and transparent and I don't wear a guard. So when people come in, when I've had mentors in the past, I've classified mentors in 2 different ways. I said safe zone mentorship, well, multiple safe zone mentorship or controlled mentorship that I just need to have that relationship, or surface level mentorship. Surface level mentorship is someone needs a mentee, you need to work with this person and they're going to help you in your career. You connect with them, you don't have anything in common with them. You feel they're not actually vested in you, that becomes a surface level mentor, and I try to get out of it as quickly as I can. But a safe zone mentor is someone that's going to really help me work through things that I can show up in a way that's actually not really good. And I can work through those situations with that individual. Now, mentorship is about helping me progress and work through things me personally, and I help them work through it. Sponsorship is, I actually cannot sponsor someone if I don't trust that you will do the job, if I don't trust that you're good. So I have to actually have personally a level of a relationship with you to actually sponsor you. But when I sponsor you, I will go to bat for you. I will say, this person will be really good in this job. This is why they're good at the job. This is what they will bring to the table. But I actually have to have a relationship with you to actually sponsor you, if that makes sense. Because you in organizations, I always have struggled with companies, people that say, I want to be your sponsor. How do you even know me to actually sponsor me? So you're going to bring me up because I'm a diverse individual and they actually sponsor me? No, you don't know my skill set is. But a sponsor is someone that actually will pick up the phone, like you were saying, Eric, will say, I'm going to introduce you to such and such. This is what they bring to the table. Then we'll talk to that person and we'll say, this is what Eric will provide. This is why I think he's a great fit for the organization. And then after you have that connection, we'll talk to you about, what did you take away from it? This is what I heard. This is what you need to work on. This is how you fit in that organization. We'll truly sponsor you and want you to be successful.
Great. Thank you. Great feedback. Again, I have a list of additional questions, but I want to take time to answer questions from the audience. So is there anyone who has a question they want to share? Please just raise your hand or drop the name in the chat, and I'll move forward with any questions. I would say, as I look at the chat, Leon, did you want to share your thoughts with the group? I see you wrote some stuff in the chat around your ethics and morals.
I don't mind sharing my view. I think I agree with what you say with regard to, there's certain aspects of yourself that you must never be willing to compromise, right? Your ethics, your morals, those things that, that speak to honesty, hard work, those types of things. But certainly earlier in my career, there were situations where and I know others as well, had to make themselves smaller in a room. Had to, couldn't be the first one to answer a question, couldn't show their passion around a particular topic, even in scenarios where others who look different were able to bring that passion and were able to, be direct in their conversation and so on, because it would be perceived differently. And I think that's just the reality that is that occurs in certain workplace environments. Not in every workplace environment, but certainly in some industries more than in others. And sometimes it's not even just limited to the industry. Sometimes it is just the individuals that you're in the room with.
No, that's great. Fair. Thanks for your perspectives, Leon. And I agree. I think part of it is understanding your situation, understanding your environment, and acting accordingly. So thanks for sharing.
Leon, one of the things that I've been assessing in my career, when I was early on, no one above me spoke up. No one above me actually would say, when situations like that, where I had to shrink myself down or I couldn't respond in a certain way, no one spoke up to actually change that type of feedback or change that type of approach. I do feel that it's imperative that people, diverse leaders, are actually speaking up to change the dynamics of the environment. I think what you're saying is real, but I also think when we get behind these closed doors, it's very important that as we continue to grow, that we're bringing others along with us to try to change that dynamic. It's not going to change tomorrow, but I think I feel like as a biracial Black man, I have a lot of accountability to change the dynamics in the environment. If I show up more of my true self, it's going to change the game for people that are coming behind me.
Agreed.
Well, that's a great point, Greg. And thanks, Leon, because, I have been appointed for just such a time as this, right? But there's a risk associated with it. So how do you balance the sponsorship or leaning in or taking a stance when you might be the only person in the room and there's risk, right? I mean, even at every level, and again, maybe less at your level, but there's always risk, right? So how do you balance that?
It's to my core. So first, I never had anyone that picked me up and actually had this conversation with me when I was early in my career. No one ever I didn't actually even have a mentor until a paralegal brother that was in Atlanta at a law firm that I was working for, that I was initially working for, actually talked to me a little bit behind closed doors of what I need to think about for my career. So for me, if I show up differently, if I have these conversations, regardless of if I get impacted or not by a conversation and being honest, I'm at least changing the dynamics. Now I'm going to be super professional. I'm going to always show up as an executive, but if I change it, it will change for my kids. It will be a different environment for my kids as they show up to work. And for me, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's about, if I show up real of who I am as an officer for a Fortune 50 company, others 10 years from now will show up and will be able to be more of themselves, even more so than who I am today. And that's what it's about. I don't live in fear anymore. I don't, if my company tomorrow says they don't need me, I know, because I have a doctorate degree, I can go teach in college. I know I can go consult. I know I can be picked up from a different organization because this company maybe didn't have the same value system anymore that my values are. So I am not trying to live in fear, but for me, I'm not living in fear because I'm trying to make it better for the people that are coming behind me.
Well, those are all great points. And again, it ties back to our discussion, understanding and owning your power, right? Yeah. As a Black professional. And so that's a perfect example of that. The other thing that comes to mind, and I just lost my point, but I think that power is important. Are there any other comments? I can go through a list of other things that I have as well, but I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for those who joined us to share thoughts or comments. Victor Patterson, are you still on the call? I know we have some board members as well. Drenell or Alatano, did you guys have thoughts?
Good afternoon. Hello. I'm loving the conversation, and there's so many things that resonated. So great, spot on. I was just having a conversation with someone about sponsorship, but to your point, you have to have that relationship before you can actually sponsor someone. But then you also think about them on the token, because again, let's be clear around when some of these sponsorship opportunities became more available as of late, and maybe other folks have sponsors throughout their career. That hasn't always been the case for me. So, I'm just thinking about that. But I'm just loving the conversation. Really appreciate the time and the advice today.
This group right here, though, I mean, we all should be supporting each other. So when we think about this network, what TC Band does is, I remember back in the day when we would all get together in the Twin Cities and we would network together. We would be in, I remember hosting an event at Target. I remember going to Wells, but we were networking together. How are we networking together? To help each other out. I mean, we are a network here of multiple companies across the world now. How are we now networking with each other? Who do we have in our network? How are we all connected on LinkedIn? If we're trying to build a connection with someone, or I want to work for this organization one day, or I want to do what you're doing someday, how are we reaching out to our own network to partner together? I think that's super important that we sometimes lose in some of these conversations. We sit here, we hear, we write our notes down, but how are we building off of that network with each other?
I think it goes back to the intentionality. When we do have these opportunities, like right now, there's a huge audience, 50 plus people that are here, but also recognizing the agency that we all carry as well, that maybe we got to bring someone to an event with us to make an opportunity, make an introduction, what have you. And so I think there's a variety of things that we can do to support each other through the forums. And it may not always be job related, but someone's looking to, go spin off and do a side gig or whatever the case may be. I tell everyone every day, all day long, I'm with the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce. I want to bring more of us into that space. I know there's a lot of people here that are entrepreneurs or thinking about owning their own business. So again, let's have a conversation around that and come be in that space as well. But again, thank you for the remarks.
Love that.
Thanks for now. I want to make a comment and then I'll get Bernard in. He had a comment for us. So great point, Craig. And that's part of why we exist, right? To create a space, right? So that some of the insights and the knowledge that you're sharing, no one would have told me that, right? And so I was a first, my experience was different. I grew up in a small town. We didn't have a J&J office or a Target office. We had Target stores, right? And so the things that I learned were things that I learned by stubbing my toe or bumping my head or those kind of things. And so part of the opportunity we create from TC Band is we bring people like you and Drenell and Latano, and we share our experiences. So the next generation might not have to stub their toe in that same way. To create a forum and a network and access and knowledge and information and the untold rules of the road that you can't find in a book. We'll talk about it in a safe space, and you take what you want, and you leave the rest, but you have access to it. Now, whether you go and you leverage the insight that you shared, or Janelle shared, or the rest of the group shared, you do with it what you want. But from a TC Brand perspective, our job is to put the food on the table. If you want to come and eat, the food will be there. It'll be high quality, really good. It'll be some ribs, beef ribs and some barbecue and some, it'll be pecan pie. It'll be some really good food. It'll be there for you. And if you want it, we'll have it for you. And so that's kind of who we are, why we exist. And so thank you for helping us continue to move that forward with, your candor and transparency. I'll hand it over to Bernard. And after Bernard, we'll probably have an opportunity for one last question. And then Greg, I'll kick it over to you for your wrap up. So Bernard, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I know many people talk about this a lot, going in, I know having your space keeping your space itself. It's the big thing I really need people, I really gonna need people to understand is this. You're only gonna find your worth if you want it. Because a lot of professionals, what I hear a lot when I listen to these conversations, they don't know where to go. You got to start with yourself. If you don't want it, don't come. If you want it, let's get the situation to the table. Because I know you talk about never stop dreaming. Great. I actually like what you said about never stop dreaming. You always got to be dreaming. My own personal professional tech platform is really about dreaming about being a business owner in the future, owning your own stuff. Let's see if we can get more strong elevated before something goes down the drain. Someone said it 100%, Bernard. Some efficacy. That is 100% correct. And I'm very, very proud of the person who has said that, because a lot of our so-called community leaders do not have any efficacy. What is their value? Have anybody goes and look at what have you done for this in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? What has been elevated? So same thing with the politicians. What has been elevated for 30 years? You've been there for a long time. You've been in these spaces a long time. What has been valued? What has been valued? Can somebody please explain?
Yeah, this is Eric. So Keela, I think Keela was on the call. She was the leader for the discussion we had on voting. But I think Greg, if you wanted to share, I'll divert to you, but I'll share my initial thoughts. I think from a politician perspective, I think we get the opportunity to vote on our politicians every time an election comes around. So if your politician isn't doing what he or she needs you to do, then there's an opportunity to select someone different. The other thing I would add is that I don't think we can depend on others. I think we have to own part of our own kind of destiny. And so as long we have, it's a dual responsibility. We have to own and act and do, and then those elected officials have to do as well. So I think it's a group accountability, but I think part of it starts with us. One, with the things that we do to move our own agendas forward, and our skills and experiences, and the things you're doing from an entrepreneurial perspective, creating concepts and ideas and taking those to market and creating your own path. And then being strategic in the elected officials that we elect to make sure that we're electing the ones that we need, that are doing things that are working to our benefit. And if they're not, then replacing them in the next election cycle with those who will.
I'm gonna be honest with you. That's gonna start slowly getting tougher as blacks are currently being replaced with the migrants coming in, the new ones that they're bringing in, the new non-black migrants. So we are that's gonna even they tried to do all the delegated process. This should have been done years ago. Because if we would have done this years ago, we wouldn't be in this worse situation that we're in. I'm just here to tell you.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate your insight. Greg, I'll hand it over to you. Feel free to share any additional thoughts. But I would like to get your thoughts as we close out, because let me see if Greg's still here. He had a hard.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
So first, I'm sorry about my voice. I've lost my voice 5 weeks ago, and I'm still just getting it back. Bernard, I would just share as I close, it's about how we come together and we have those conversations together. And then we collectively work together to change. We're going to deal with a world. This next year is going to be hard. I feel the next year is going to be hard. The last couple of years were really hard, but we need to come together as a community and work through it together. And how we show up together with action is really important. But what I'd say in just closing is, my doors are open for everyone in this group. My doors are open of how do we continue to build and grow together. So I think it's important that each of us stay connected. It's important that each of us continue to help each other, continue to navigate the difficulties of this world, difficulties of our career, and everything that we deal with as we show up at work. So I would just say, I challenge each of us to look at who's on these calls, make sure that we're connected via LinkedIn. If the only person you connect with, go ahead and reach out to me. If it's just even say hi, it may take a while for me to get back to you, but I will say hi back. But we need to build and support each other as we navigate our careers, because we are changing the way our children will show up for their careers. We are changing the way our grandchildren will show up for their careers, and how we support each other is super important. Eric, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. I'll put some comments in the chat. Again, you're engaging and insightful and wise and transparent as always. And you exceeded expectations as you always do. So I appreciate you allocating time, and I appreciate your support and advocacy on behalf of our community and on behalf of TC Band. Have a good remainder of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you.